Hi, everyone. I'm really happy to have you here. We're live at Cordine live stream balance forwards. That's what we're going to be talking about today. And we're going to also take some questions from people. We've had some advanced questions. Really appreciate everybody putting in their thoughts and questions prior to the live stream as well. I have Thomas and David here with me. They'll introduce themselves in a moment. I'm Paul Lidney. I'm the VP of Marketing and Sales at Cordine. I just wanted to let everybody know, first of all, it'd be awesome to thank you for joining us, and it'd be awesome if you just drop in your name and where you're joining from would be fantastic if you're up for it. And obviously there's the comments chat section here. If you have any questions as we go along, please don't hesitate to put your question in the comment field. I would also mention that we're going to record this, so this will be recorded, so you can always go back to it at a later date. Yeah, we're looking forward to getting into it with you. I will actually pass off to David now to introduce himself.
Hello, everyone. Thanks, Paul. Thanks for joining everyone this morning, afternoon, or evening, depending on where you're tuning in from. My name is David. I do support at Cordine. I'm a commercial pilot myself. I've been with Cordine for nearly a year now, and talking to you today all the way from Belfast in Northern Ireland.
Awesome. And Thomas?
Hey, everyone. I'm Thomas. I am the manager of customer support here at Cordine, and I've been in the aviation business since before cell phones. I'm here to help do some balance forward discussion, and let's just dive right into it. All right, so what we're looking at here is a paper logbook, and this is probably the scenario that most of you, if you're tuning into this webinar, find yourself in. You have a bunch of time in a paper logbook, and you want to know how to get this into LogTem Pro. There's various ways to do this, and we're going to discuss a few of them. Basically, one of the big questions we get is, how do I enter a balance forward? Because people think there's some special thing you have to do to enter your balance forward time. And the short answer is you enter this into LogTem Pro just like any other entry. You just create a flight, just like you would a single flight. You enter a bunch of total time, you enter a bunch of seat time, a bunch of cross country, a bunch of instrument. So how to do it is the simple answer. What you enter is the more difficult one, and that's the one that we're going to kind of address here today as we go along. Because basically you cannot enter just all of this flying on the bottom row here as one entry in LogTem Pro, because most likely it has a mixture of different types of aircraft. And in LogTem Pro, type information is really critical. You don't like to mix multi-engine land, single engine land, all that kind of stuff together in one entry, simulator time. You really need to separate that out in LogTem Pro, because a lot of the reports that you generate will look to see what kind of fly-in this is and will populate the report in that certain section for multi-engine land, single engine land. So the hard part of entering the balance forwards is just going through your paper logbook and separating the time as specific as you need it to be. What do I mean by specific? So let's sort of look at what the gold standard of separating your time in a logbook would be. Here we have a few balance forward entries that are specific to each individual aircraft. In this scenario, the person went through their paper logbook, they found all their time for each kind of aircraft they flew. This is probably the best scenario you can do for balance forward entries. You take all your seminal time, all your C-172 time, and you figure out it's not just splitting up total time. For all these entries, you have to split up nighttime, PIC, SIC, dual received, all the pertinent information that's in your paper logbook. You need to split it all up. And then at the end, all these total times will equal that one big long entry in your paper logbook. So that's the bit of the homework. But once you do it, it's done. You only have to do it once. Doing an entry like this will make all your reports look good. If you ever want to go through and get turbine time, MEL time, you can do this because all this information is already in Log10 Pro. All these types in the types tab here, you can see all these entries are already designated as airplane, single engine land, airplane, multi-engine land. The simulator entries are separated out. Simulator entries must always be separated out too. So in your paper logbook, you're going to want to separate the sim as well. So this is the best example. So you can see for this customer, they have their balance forwards, and then they just go right into their electronic logbook for individual flights. This is the best scenario, but maybe you don't need to get that specific. Maybe you have 75 different types of aircraft. So maybe there's different ways you can do this. You can get different granularity with your balance forwards, and that's what we're going to talk about here. So let's look at a different scenario. Here's probably the most basic level you can get with balance forwards. Here you can see this customer, this is the same logbook, it's just presented in a different way. Instead of doing individual types, there's single engine land, multi-engine land, and simulator. 3 balance forwards, and then it goes right into the individual flying. This is the most basic you can get probably if you have mixed types. At the minimum, you're going to want to separate it out by single engine land, multi-engine land, and sim. This will make the reports work for the most part. When you enter these as SEL and MEL, you're going to have to go into the types tab and designate them as airplane, single engine land. MEL would be airplane, multi-engine land. Sim is simulator. There's a few tricks to entering balance forwards that are a little bit different than entering individual flights. One of the things you're going to want to do before entering balance forwards is turning your autofill times off. So on the Mac, you would do this by going to Preferences, Time, and all these little checkboxes right here. If you had any filled in, you're going to want to make sure those are off because you don't want any time autofilling by mistake. You're going to want to make sure all these times are manually entered. The other thing you're going to want to do with your balance forwards is pick a single date for your balance forward. Usually this is going to span a date range, but in Log10 Pro, every balance forward needs to have an individual date. What we recommend doing is entering the last date of flying for that balance forward. So for single engine land, the last date of flying was January 1st. For multi-engine land, the last date of flying was November 28th. So this is a very basic level of balance forward, and this might be all you need.
Thomas,
yes.
Can I jump in for 2 seconds? Could you just quickly run through the autofill? That felt quite zippy to me. Like maybe we could just
sure.
So Log10 Pro and then preferences.
So here's how you get to the time fields on the Mac. You go to Preferences, Time, and then here's all the time fields. And the little checkboxes are the autofill times. Those are where you want to turn off for balance forward entries. When you're done with your balance forward entries, you can go back in and turn them back on. So if you're using iOS, all this still applies. And for iOS, you would go to More, Settings, Time Calculations, Autofill Times. And we're going to have a couple screenshots of the iOS app later. So we'll show you a little bit of how this applies to iOS. But everything I'm saying applies to both apps, the Mac app and the iOS app. If you have any custom times in your logbook and they have the autofill times selected, you're going to want to make sure that those are deselected as well. So that's basically it for the autofill times. Once everything's off, you can start entering your data. So here in this example, you'll see that the total time is split up, the night time is split up, PIC, SIC, dual receive cross country is split up. Going across here, there's other fields you might want to designate, takeoffs, landings, approaches. All that stuff can be split up into separate balance forwards. You'll see I have some fields here, PIC night, SIC night. The other thing you're going to want to do with your balance forwards is designate how much nighttime is in each seat. If we look at this MEL entry here, you can see there's 373 hours of night, but there's both PIC and SIC in the entry. So if somebody wanted to know how much PIC night they had, just with this information, you wouldn't know. LogTime Pro has specific seat night fields where we can designate specifically where that night goes. On the Mac, if you go into the time, preferences time, where we just were, and there's an advanced tab here, at the top, you can see specific night fields, PIC, SIC, dual received. By turning these on, you can either enter on the right here, or you can enter directly into the box. But you can designate how much of this night was in the specific seats. So for this, looking at this entry was 373 hours of night, 213 were PIC night, 158 was SIC night. There's also cross-country night is also here if you want to use that, if you want to split out your cross-country night. If you do some relief flying, there's also, and that's in your balance forwards, you might also need to use the relief night function. So that's basically the most basic level you can get with your balance forwards. And for a lot of you, this is going to work. If you're at a point in your career where you're not applying for a lot of jobs, you're pretty set where you are, this would be good, and this would be fine, and your reports will look good. But let's say somebody wanted to know how much multi-engine turbine time they had, or how much PIC turbine time they had. In that scenario, you're going to have to get your balance forwards a little more specific. And that's what David is going to show you here. And so I'm going to pass it off to David.
Great. I'm just going to switch over to your screen, David. There you go. You're up and running. Fire away.
Thank you very much. Well, we're going to start exactly where Thomas left off there. So you can see down here that we've got the SIM, the MEL, and the SEL balance forwards that Thomas was just demonstrating. So what we're going to want to do now is divide these from a generic single engine land to 2 different or even 3 different entries. Each of them will have a type of engine that those hours have been flown with. So first of all, let's start by, just because we've got a lot of entries here, so let's start by putting a filter on. So let's just create a smart group here, bottom left corner, new smart group. And then, because most of the balance forward entries will be a lot longer than the rest of your flights, what we can do is filter the flights that we've got in the logbook based on the total time they have. So if we go down here to time, and then total time, and then just for this example, we're going to use the total time is greater than 24 hours. Depending on the sort of flying that you're doing and the balance forward entries that you have, you might have to change that figure, but for now we're going to use 24. Now, because we're using simulator time as well, we want to filter as well by time simulator down here, and then same again, greater than 24 hours. Now, the way that this is set up right now, you will see here that it says match all of the following criteria. So at this point in time, this smart group is going to try and show us flights that have more than 24 hours and also more than 24 hours of simulator time. So we want to change this to any, so that we can get either flights that are longer than 24 hours or entries where the simulator time is greater than 24. So let's just create this for now. And oh, there we go. It just took a second. So we've got the 3 entries here. So we're going to start with the SEL. Now, you will see here the SEL has a total time of 199.9. Now, have a look at the 199 there. Have a look at the total time in this mark group, 1234.1, and the total time of the logbook, 6441.63. Now, just bear those numbers in mind for the time being, and we'll come back to those later. The first thing that we'll need to do to divide this entry will be to create a new aircraft type where we are defining that type as the type of engine that we want to use. So to do that, we can just go to the type section and then create here at the bottom left, new aircraft type. And then in this case, we want to divide that entry by single engine land piston and single engine land turbine. So let's start with the SEL piston. And there's no make, there's no model. Now, engine type, we want to get all the piston times, so we can use reciprocating here. There's a drop-down list. There's a drop-down list where you can choose different types. So in this case, we're going to use reciprocating. Category, well, this is an airplane, so we're going to use airplane. And then class, because we're using the SEL example, we're going to use single engine land. Now, it is very important in general in LogTime Pro to have these 3 parameters when you're creating a new aircraft type, except if it's a simulator. The reason for this is that these are the attributes that are being passed on to the flight. So we're creating a new entry with the aircraft type called SEN SEL piston. So now we're telling LogTime Pro that those hours are flown in a reciprocating engine in an airplane, and those hours are in a single engine land. So we've got the SEL piston. Let's go ahead and create the turbine one as well. So we can call it SEL turbine. Same again, no make or model. Engine type, in this case, we want to use turbine. Same again, it's an airplane, and it's of a single engine land class. Now we've got those out of the way. So let's just go back to the logbook here for a second. And now we're actually going to divide that entry. Now, this would be when we go to our logbook, do our calculations, work out how many of those 199.9 hours are turbine, which ones are piston, etc. So let's just fast forward for a second. We've already done that. So let's create a new entry. And then this one, the entry was on the 1st of January 2008. And then we're going to start with the SEL piston. So the aircraft type, we're going to give it the SEL piston that we've just created. And then we've already got the breakdown. So let's just put it in here. So we know that our SEL piston is 139.6 hours. Our nighttime is 28. PIC is 95.4. There's no SIC for the SEL piston. Our dual receive time is 44.2. Cross country 65. 12.8 for actual instruments. 4.6 for simulated instrument. No simulator time because, as Thomas said, it is good practice to separate those. And then PIC night and dual receive night, the advanced night fields that Thomas was talking about just there. So we've got 20 of PIC night and we've got 8 of dual receive night. Just before we go and move forward, it is good practice just to have a very quick check now and make sure that the PIC night and dual receive night, which are essentially our night hours, are not greater than this night figure that we've entered here. So in this case, 20 and 8, 28, so we're good. So we can continue. So now if we go back to the smart group that we created. Now, do you remember when I said earlier, have a look at these numbers? You will see now that this total has changed as well as the total time. The reason for this is because we have created a new entry with our SEL piston time, but that time was already accounted for in our SEL original entry. So what we have to do now is modify this entry to deduct from it all the total time from this one, the 139.6, and the subsequent fields. So in this case, we would be creating a new one with the SEL turbine time that the SEL turbine type that we created just there at the beginning. So let's just fast forward there for a second. You don't want to sit there and watch me fight the calculator. So let's just bring up this logbook here that already has that. So we've got here the 199.9 total time, and that's all of our SEL time brought forward. If we compare to the original one, it is exactly the same. And we've already divided it between the piston one that we created here live, and then the turbine one that was the remainder of the hours. Now, for a lot of people, this level of detail might be enough, but let's just say that you want to go down to even more detail. So instead of just having a generic engine type, like an engine family, to say you want specific types of engines. So instead of having turbine time, you want your turboprop time and your jet time separated, for example. So in this case, we've used the SEL for the previous example. So let's use the multi-engine land for this example. So let's just go back to the balance forward that we created here earlier. You will see that in the meantime, this new logbook already has the piston and turbine time separated into. This is exactly the same thing that we did with the SEL, and but just done in advance. So let's just filter now only by those MEL entries. So we know that all of our MEL entries have here, for this balance forward, have an MEL at the beginning. So we can create a new smart group that will filter by those. So let's just create a new smart group here. And then for this one, we want the condition, as we've seen there, that the aircraft type, the name contains the MEL that we had there. So let's just give it a second to load. And then we've got here the two entries. These two entries here are the equivalent of the original MEL entry that Thomas created. But we want to break it down further. So same as before, the first thing would be to create a new aircraft type that we're defining, instead of with a turbine engine type, with a jet engine type. So let's just go here to types very quickly, and then we can create a new type that we're going to call MEL jet. Same as before, no make, no model. But in this case, in the engine type, we're going to use from the drop-down menu, we're going to use jet. Same as before, it's an airplane. And then in this case, because we were using the MEL, it's multi-engine land. So there's our jet type. And now we want to create a turboprop as well. So another new type. And then this one we can call MEL turboprop. And then same, no make model. Engine type in this case would be, let's just select it from the drop-down menu. Turboprop here. Category same as before, airplane, and then multi-engine land. So once we've got to this, what we would need to do is exactly what we did in the previous case. We would have to break down these totals of MEL turbine into the MEL jet and MEL turboprop. So you would just need to, same again, go and do the calculations, create a new entry, and just make sure that the total MEL is adjusted by the amount of hours that you're entering into the jet of turboprop. This is MAG, but as Thomas said earlier, for those of you on iOS, for the types, you can just go to more at the bottom right corner, tap on types, select the type that you want to edit, or tap on the top right corner to create a new one. And then you will be able there to see exactly the same fields. And then if you tap on the individual fields, then you will be able to edit those fields and configure them as well. Same again, this level of detail might be good enough for probably the vast majority of you here today, but now some recruiters might ask you for an even more detailed breakdown of your hours. So in this case, there's a couple more things that would need to be done, which Thomas is just going to go through now. So back to you, Thomas.
Great, here you go. I'm going to put you on There's your screen, Thomas. Far away.
All right, so now I'm picking up where David left off. You can see all these balance forwards are the ones we just created. This is a great level of detail, and really the vast majority of you, this is going to be fine. This is going to be great. But there are a couple cases. Let me just show you one real life example. This is a report that we created for an airline recruiter here at LogTime Pro. They asked us to build this per their specifications, and they actually use this report for all of their hiring applicants. There's some level of detail in this report that would actually need to be the balance forwards would have to be further split up. If we look at the balance forwards here, and we look at what they're asking for, all the stuff on the left side is fine, but on the right here, up in the top right corner, this is what I'm talking about specifically. PIC night, no problem, we can get that. But look, there's cross country, and then they want night PIC cross country or cross country PIC. Those are some level of details that go down to the specific seat time. So what we've talked about here with the balance forwards is separating them out by type. But to get this level of detail to where somebody would want to see cross country night PIC, you're gonna want to have to split these out by seat type. And what do I mean by that? So in this example, we have MEL jet, but you can see we have PIC and SIC here. There's no way to know how much of this cross country is in PIC, how much of this cross country is in SIC. If you need to get to this level of detail, you would have to make a new balance forward. And I just duplicated the MEL jet here, so you can see now I have 2 MEL jets, and you would have to split up the total time by seat. So you would drop the SIC time down here. You would make this your SIC, all these entries. You would split up the cross country by PIC and SIC. So this is what you would have to do for all of those entries. This is a bit of a fringe case, but I'm just telling you that there might be some scenarios to where you look at your balance forwards and you might need to adjust them even more. But like David said, for the vast majority of you out there, getting to these types split up, getting to this level of detail is going to be really, really a good way to do your balance forwards.
Yeah, one of the things I just wanted to mention to everybody online, thanks again for joining us, is that our support team are experts at this stuff. So, you know, if you need to get to this level of granularity, or if any questions arise throughout, like, please don't hesitate to get in touch with our support team. You can, I'm just going to put it up here. You can contact us direct from iOS, tapping more help, contact support. You can even send your logbook into us, and we can work with you to figure this out. On the Mac, it's you go to the help menu and contact support. So just wanted to highlight that, you know, if any questions arise or you have any issues with doing this stuff, you know, our support team's definitely here to help.
Real quick too, Paul, I saw a question come in. I glanced over relief nighttime, and that confused somebody, and understandably so. This is they asked what relief was, and so that is for long haul flying. That is for multi-crew flights, to where one crew's in the bunk and one crew's in the cockpit. So that would be the relief time. Probably not going to be relevant to your balance forwards. That's more relevant to individual logging. So, but if that's the type of flying you do, that's what that field is for. So I just wanted to answer that real quick.
Thanks a lot. Actually, you know, we did actually have a question around smart groups that since you're here and on it, around being able to create a smart group that tracks each type of time, so each seat. Could you just illustrate, you know, setting up a smart group, for example, for SIC?
Yeah, sure. So this is really easy. So let's make a new smart group. I'm going to call this SIC, and all I'm going to do is say show results, SIC time. And there's all the SIC time in this logbook, 816.7.
And what about
if you wanted to actually filter the data that's displayed as well, you can go to time and only show me the flights that have SIC time that is greater than 0. Again, we're still displaying the SIC time, but this would filter your flight list to show you only the flights that have SIC time in them. So, and you can do this for
like SIC night, for example, like if you wanted to do that.
Yeah, sure. Here's a little trick. If you hold the control button down, you can duplicate the smart group. So I'll duplicate that. We'll call it night. So let's say SIC night is greater than 0. Total time here, SIC night. And now you can see 89 hours of SIC night in this logbook.
Fantastic. Thanks, Thomas. I hope that answers your question, Alex. And obviously, as I said, you can reach out to support if there's any specific more complex smart groups that you want to create. Our support team standing by could definitely help. Just let us know what you want, and we can create a smart group for you and share it, and give you a link that you're able to share with others too if you have colleagues who want the same.
Real quick too, regarding these specific night fields like PIC night and SIC night, if you're logging individual flights, you're not gonna need these fields. LogTem Pro knows how much, if you log PIC in a flight and then you log night, it's gonna automatically log PIC night. The only reason you would need to show and use these fields is if you have multiple seat types in a single entry, usually balanced forwards, or if you log like an entire day of flying in one entry. But for individual flying, these fields will automatically be populated.
Yeah, and LogTem Pro automatically calculates nights as long as you have the
out and in.
Yeah, out and in. Thank you. Okay, where are we going to? We're going to David now?
Yeah, let's go over to David. I think he's going to show us some iOS examples.
Great. So I'm adding your logbook. There you go. We got David's iPad. Woo!
Thank you. So we have already looked at various levels of details that we can go down to when creating balance forward entries. And as you could probably predict, there's still one more, but I promise this is the last one. You know, we've done most of what we've done is, as Thomas was saying, we've done it on Mac just for presentation purposes, but this entire process is exactly the same if you do it on iOS. So in this case, if we were to go down here to the logbook tab and select, for example, the SEL turbine that we created earlier, then you will see that these fields are here, and then you can just enter all of the information as you know, as the breakdown from your own logbook. Worth noting as well, you might see a different set of fields. That doesn't mean that you don't have that field. It just means that it might not be visible. So once the flight is selected, if you go to the top right corner where there are 3 dots and then tap on it, you will see a new menu. And then at the bottom of the menu, there's that configure fields. So if you go there to configure fields, you will see that back in the logbook view, every single section has a little configure section at the bottom. So then if we go to the time section and then tap on configure section, then you can see all of the time fields that exist in LogTem Pro. You can make them visible just by, or invisible by tapping a toggle. And as well as that, there's quite a few custom time fields as well that you can create. You can name to your liking. So time 1, I'm not very creative today. And then you can just toggle it on as well, and that will be visible in your logbook. But anyway, back to the balance forwards. The last level of granularity that we wanted to get to would obviously be to create a single entry for each type of aircraft that you have flown. So instead of having an MEL turbine, then you would have, for example, one entry for your A320 time and another entry for your Dash AQ 400 time. So in this case, and just like the other ones, the main thing would be to set up the aircraft type accordingly. So if we go here to the types, and then when we are here, we can scroll down on the left, and that will make a search bar appear. And then this search bar will either search within your types or within all types. The all types is a database in LogTime Pro that's based on all of the official ICAO identifiers. Now, you can also search by names if you don't know the exact code. So we talked about the Dash AQ 400. Let's just say I don't know what the code is. So I can just type in Dash and then a list of the different types that meet that criteria will appear. So in this case, let's say the Dash AQ 400 that we were talking about. Once you tap it, you'll see that all of the information just also fills in. You've got the airplane, turboprop, multi-engine land. Once that's there, then you could just go to your logbook, then create a new entry.
David, can I stop you there? Because I think that's a really important point in terms of the types, like going back to the types tab.
Yeah, of course. Give me a second. Back here.
Yeah, so just that drag down in terms of when you're adding a type, if you add a type to be able to search, like the search field doesn't come up automatically.
No, that's correct. And originally, when you go into the window, you will just see something like what is currently on the screen, a recently used part, and then your types alphabetically ordered. To be able to see the search tab, you will have to slightly scroll down, and then you will see that there's a search bar that appears there. That once tapped, you will then be able to search the different types of aircraft types that are in the database.
Great. Thanks a lot. Keep going.
No problem.
Keep.
So then.
Yeah, sorry, David. I also like the fact that since LogTime Pro does use the ICAO database of aircraft types, the ICAO database. So if you don't know the 4-letter code, as you mentioned, that is a really powerful tool just to be able to enter Dash or Seminole.
Yeah. So
or
if we enter here, as Thomas said, just semi, and then you will get different. So Seminole here. Oh.
Yeah, it'll search all the words within the aircraft database too. So King Air, things like that. If you don't know the exact codes, so that's a really powerful way to search. And then you also the My Types and All Types little toggles at the bottom too. That's another thing that you need to make sure that All Types is selected if you are searching for the entire database.
Thanks, Thomas. So if we quickly, just to get this part wrapped up, if we then go to the logbook tab, once we've already created the aircraft type, so we've got one here, and then if we associate this entry, then we'll get a list here, and then we've already created a Dash 8. So we just tap on the Dash 8, and then we would just enter all of the hours as we've been doing throughout the webinar, and then that means that we would get a breakdown of the individual hours flown in the Dash 8, for example. So if we go back to the radar tab, you will see here that you will get a breakdown of each aircraft type that you have created, and then you will get a breakdown of all of the individual seat times. So these are all flights that would have been entered on a daily basis. Obviously, the Dash is empty because we've only just created it. But if we go down to the balance forward entries that we created earlier on the webinar, all the MEL piston, turbine, and everything, you will see that you get a nice breakdown here of the individual totals by aircraft type. Now, all of these as well, once the balance forward is created, obviously those hours, the reason why we've gone into such detail is so that when you generate a report with your experience, or when you generate a logbook report, all of the hours are being put in the right place. So we go and generate a report. For example, this flight experience, it just gives you a nice little breakdown. So if we tap here, configure report, we can actually only generate a report with one of the smart groups that we've got in the logbook. So we created earlier in the presentation a smart group with our balance forward entry. So we can just tap here on filter group and then use the balance forward smart group that we created earlier and then generate the logbook. You will see here that we get a breakdown just of all the hours that we've entered in different, all of them going in the right place. This doesn't just affect the normal reports, but if you were to create an actual logbook report, if you wanted to print your logbook, for example, so let's just go here to just a generic logbook, the Cordan International. So for this one, we're going to generate the full logbook. So just tap generate, and then we're going to generate the full logbook, and you will see once it loads that all of the balance forward entries blend in perfectly with the rest of the logbook. But the most important thing is that not just that they blend in, but all of the individual values that we've entered will go to the right columns, will go to the right place. And the most important thing is that the overall totals of the logbook, which will represent eventually the overall totals of your aviation experience, are going to the right place. So initially in the first page here, then we can see all of our balance forward entries there. We can see that they're being they go to ASEL or AMEL as necessary, jet time, turboprop, depending on what we've entered. And then all of the totals here are correct. As well, as Thomas was saying, you enter the balance forward once, then you go and log your normal flights just as you carry on flying. And then at the very bottom of the report, just scrolling all the way, then you will see that all of the totals of the logbook will include both the entries that you have entered one by one, as well as all of the entries that we've entered as a balance forward. Now, one last thing before I pass it back to Paul. We did focus all of this on multi-engine land, single engine land, turbine, jet, but obviously that is not the only type of flying that's out there. There's different types of flying, which means that you might need to enter a slightly different type of balance forward entry. So in this case, what you would need to do is the three fields that we talked about that would need to be configured, the category, engine type, and class. You will just have to define them in a slightly different manner. So just as a quick example, and every other type should be exactly the same. If we create a very quick type, and then for a multi-engine C. So then the only thing that we would need to do different here is in the category, we will just need to make sure that we're using multi-engine C and then use the appropriate engine type and category as necessary. So there's a bunch of different categories, as you can see here: sea, land, free balloon, airships, and then there's as well different engine types that you might need. So you can break down, for example, the piston, it further down in 2-cycle, 4-cycle. There's different types of turbines as well. There's ramjets, there's turbofans, turboshafts, and then obviously the different categories as well: airplane, glider, and different types of simulators as well, depending on the simulator experience that you're trying to enter. So there's the PDT, there's simulator, and there's a training device. So all of this, even though we centered it around the MEL and the SEL, this is applicable to any experience that you might need to enter. Back to you, Paul.
That's fantastic. Thanks a lot, David. So we did have another question from Jean-Michel Dumont. Is there a way to populate a report that will combine same-day entries into one? I was wondering, Thomas, whether that you can use the trips, or if you had any other advice on that one.
Right. There is not a report in Logtime Pro that currently does that, but you might be able to create a custom report if you're a little bit good with CSS. Every report in Logtime Pro is customizable at a code level. So we have an article on our website. If you just search custom report at support.coredyne.com, then you can see a quick example. But we don't have an actual report that does that. You might be able to use.
I thought we had a trips report, like you could export trips specifically, and then if you created a trip for each of your days flying.
That might be, yeah, that might be a bit of a workaround. So let's see here. If we look at this logbook, and we have, if you created a trip for every single day, you could, let's make a little trick here to create trips. If you highlight a couple flights, create a trip, and then you can go back to the logbook and create another trip. You could just create trips for all of your flying. And then there is a report. If I go to USA, there's a trip report that would then if you made a trip for every single day, then you could use this trip report, and it would populate this for everything that you created in those trips. So there is a way to work around it like this. But the work, so every day you flew, you would then just have to go create a trip for that flying. So you can see here we have 2 trips that we created, and that report generated a single line entry for each of those trips. Again, let me go to the report. It was in the USA section, and it was the JEP Pro Trip Log 27. That is a report that specifically generates the data in the trips tab in Log10 Pro.
Yeah, the other question we had actually before, and we've just had a question from Michael about importing directly from AIMS and importing schedules. I wonder if you could run through that quickly, or not quickly, slowly, so everybody gets it.
Sure. On the importing schedules is, first of all, it's only available on the Mac app natively, but you can use, for iOS, you can import AIMS. I think we have a partnership with Rosterbuster. There's also an app out there called iAIMS. So there's a few ways you can import it into iOS, but on the Mac app, you go to the file.
One second, I think iAIMS, let's just do that in a second. I think iAIMS, we actually have a partnership with them in terms of sharing data. So I'm not sure if it's up to date, but I think they run our API, and you're able to export directly from iAIMS into Log10 Pro.
Yeah.
So on the could you go back? I jumped in right when you were doing the process.
Sure. So on the Mac app, to import any schedule, not just AIMS, but to import any airline schedule, if you go to the File menu up top here, go down to Import Schedule, and you'll get this window that pops up. And then you can see in this window, there is a long list of airline systems, such as AIMS here at the top, but there's also just individual airlines. So the schedule importer is, each schedule is built specifically for that airline or airline system. So usually what you have to do is copy and paste from your airline system, and then if you were to use AIMS, or make a PDF or an HTML file. So there's 3 ways to do it. Like AIMS, some of these systems want you to import the file. So you can see AIMS is asking for my file. Some of these systems, let's just go down to Flicka. And you can see this one has a paste your schedule here. So some of these systems want you to actually copy the computer screen from your system and then paste it into here. I don't have any airline schedule examples on me. And how to get this data in your airline is specific to the airline. So it's hard to tell you exactly how to do it in your system. But for the most part, you go to the place in your airline system where you see your monthly schedule. We have an article on our website, support.coredyne.com, for importing airline schedules that goes through a few examples, AIMS as well. So there are some further instructions online. I think for AIMS, though, you do export an HTML, and then you import that HTML file here.
Great.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks, Thomas. We had another question come in, which I thought would be good to highlight our audit report, and not sorry, I'm putting you a bit on the spot to go to the article, but just somebody who said how to get log 10 totals matching with my original logbook if they have a few hours over or under when totaling. And I'm sure there are multiple potential issues with this in terms of depending on how you're tracking your time and whether it's decimal or by minute or what, that may actually be the issue. But I wondered about just showing the audit report, and I could put a link in there as well, just showing the.
Yeah, sure. So that question to me sounds like they're comparing the totals they put in Log10 Pro to their actual paper logbook. In that scenario, it would be specific to the data that you entered. I don't know if that's anything that we could catch, but and the other thing that Paul mentioned is the format. If you go to, you can view your time in decimal time in Log10 Pro. Like we have in this logbook, we have decimal time. You can show 2 decimal time, where it gets even more specific, or you can show hours, minutes. So when you do this, when you go from hours, minutes, or 2 decimal to single decimal, the total time will change a little bit because there's a natural rounding variation. So a lot of times when people see differences in time, small differences, a lot of times it's due to the time format. So that can also explain why you get differences sometimes too. For the audit report, oh, here we go. Paul is sharing the link to the audit report now. The audit report we have on our website here. So Paul just shared the audit report in the chat, and it takes you to this web page. You can see on this web page that there's a link to download the report. And this report goes through your logbook and looks at some common scenarios that people find to be causing some errors in their data, and kind of runs like a little report, generates it, and then spits out anything that it finds. And then if you're wondering why a specific entry is in there, there's explanations here. We can run a report here real quick. I have this audit report downloaded already. This is an example logbook that I have generated for this webinar. So I was a little loose with some of the data, so it might have a few errors in there. First thing you can see here is that there's entries over 24 hours. Well, yeah, we just entered a bunch of balance forwards. So those, you're gonna have to verify that those are okay. But it also looks at things like seat time doesn't total up to total time. It looks at seat night time doesn't add up to total night. So I've been playing around with this logbook for example purposes. So I'm not surprised that it finds some errors, but it shows you the date and allows you to go through and verify those entries. If you find things that are correct, like obviously these entries over 24 hours are balance forward entries, then you can exclude an entry being included in the logbook by using, if you go to the duty, we've designated the custom 18 field in Log10 Pro. It's a checkbox field. I've already renamed it Audit OK. I just turned it on. If we go back to the logbook, you can see I have an Audit OK button. I'm going to take all my balance forward entries here, and I'm going to say these are okay. Don't include it in the audit. So then the next time I run this report, all those entries that showed over 24 hours, they should be excluded. So, and they are. So all the errors that were in that report were actually in all the balance forward entries. So now my logbook's good. So that's another way that you might be able to verify your balance forward entries. You can specifically run your balance forwards through this report. And that should total up sometimes and look at it. And yeah, that's a nice little feature that we just recently added. It's you have to download it from the website, and then it'll appear in the My Reports tab of your reports page.
Perfect. Yeah, and that's all described on this support article, in the support article that's highlighted on the screen now. All right, so I think we've covered off all the questions. I'll just kind of leave it for the last few minutes just to see if there are any other questions that have arisen from anybody who's live online now. We'll hang on for a few minutes, see if there's any other questions. As I mentioned, please don't hesitate to contact our support team. If you have any questions at all, you can also email us. Obviously, you can go to our support site, support.cordine.com, or email us at support@cordine.com. It'll all go through to the team, and we'd be happy to help. So I'll just stay for a couple more minutes. Thank you, Thomas and David. Let's just switch on to, we can see us all. Woohoo. Sorry, I should have warned you in advance. Yeah, really appreciate everybody joining us. We'll finish off in a couple minutes if we don't get any more questions. As I said, please contact us if you have any questions at all. We are more than happy to help you with any issues, challenges, questions, or smart groups, or anything you want to talk to us about. Really appreciate everybody joining us. And thanks again, Thomas and David, for an awesome webinar.
Yeah, thanks everybody. And please feel free to contact our support team. We're standing by, ready to help y'all.
Come on, David. Last word.
Last words. I'm the last one. Thank you very much, everyone. If you contact support, who knows, you might end up being lucky enough and talking to me. So
that's
hope
awesome.
to see you out there.
Right on. All right, guys. We'll end the broadcast now. Thanks again for joining, and yeah, look out on our newsletter and emails for the next live stream. Do let us know if there's any topics you'd like us to cover. Just contact us at support@cordine.com. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.
Okay. Bye now.